On October 15, 2021, police responded to a distress call at an Oak Street apartment complex and discovered the lifeless body of 32-year-old Ethan Reed, a well-liked high school teacher. His girlfriend, 29-year-old software engineer Olivia Rogan, was immediately identified as the prime suspect. This launched an investigation into a deeply disturbing case of surveillance, control, and psychological manipulation. On the night of October 15, 2021, authorities in Ashland, Oregon, were dispatched to an apartment complex on Oak Street after receiving a 911 call reporting a possible disturbance. Upon entering one of the units, they were confronted with a harrowing scene. Ethan Reed, a respected and beloved 32-year-old high school English teacher, lay dead in a pool of blood. The violent nature of the crime and the setting, inside Ethan's own home, immediately raised red flags. The crime scene bore signs of a struggle, and the brutality of the attack stunned even seasoned officers. As the initial shock of the discovery settled, attention turned quickly to Ethan's living girlfriend, 29-year-old Olivia Rogan. Olivia, a successful software engineer, had been in a relationship with Ethan for approximately 2 years. Though she appeared emotionally shattered and compliant when taken into custody, investigators soon unearthed a chilling pattern of behavior that positioned her not just as a suspect, but as a central figure in a horrifying narrative of obsession turned deadly. From the outset, the circumstances surrounding the killing suggested that this was not a random act of violence or a break-in gone wrong. Olivia was known to have access to Ethan's apartment and had reportedly been seen entering the building shortly before the crime took place. What followed was an intensive investigation that pulled back the layers of a toxic, deteriorating relationship, one marked by emotional manipulation, surveillance, and psychological dominance. The discovery of hidden cameras strategically placed throughout Ethan's apartment would later confirm that this was a premeditated act driven by escalating control and paranoia. This tragic event served as a catalyst for uncovering a deeply disturbing story that shocked the community and shed light on the extreme dangers of obsessive relationships fueled by unchecked psychological issues and technological overreach. According to friends and co-workers, Ethan and Olivia had appeared to be the perfect couple. However, behind closed doors, Olivia had grown increasingly controlling, installing hidden cameras in Ethan's home and tracking his phone. She accused him of cheating regularly and would often show up unannounced at his workplace. Ethan confided in a colleague just weeks before his death that he was planning to end the relationship but feared Olivia's reaction. To outsiders, Ethan Reed and Olivia Rogan were the ideal modern couple. Ethan, a charismatic and dedicated high school English teacher, and Olivia, a driven and successful software engineer, had been together for 2 years. They often posted smiling photos online, attended social functions hand in hand, and maintained a veneer of domestic harmony that deceived most friends and colleagues. But those closest to Ethan would later reveal that the relationship was far from picture perfect. As the investigation into Ethan's death progressed, police interviewed dozens of people who knew the couple, friends, co-workers, neighbors, and what emerged was a deeply troubling portrait of emotional control and surveillance. Olivia, once described as warm and intelligent, had over time become obsessive and possessive. She frequently accused Ethan of being unfaithful, despite having no concrete evidence, and her distrust manifested in increasingly disturbing behavior. Olivia had secretly installed hidden surveillance cameras throughout Ethan's apartment, including private areas such as the bedroom and living room. She also gained access to his smartphone and used GPS tracking to monitor his whereabouts at all times. Investigators would later recover software on her devices that confirmed she had installed spyware without Ethan's consent. Her obsession also invaded Ethan's professional life. Co-workers at the high school where Ethan taught said Olivia would often show up unannounced, sometimes under guise bringing lunch, other times simply to check in. Her surprise visits were frequent enough to raise eyebrows among Ethan's colleagues, many of whom said he looked increasingly stressed and withdrawn in the weeks leading up to his death. Perhaps most chillingly, Ethan confided in one close colleague, a fellow teacher, just 3 weeks before he was murdered. In a quiet conversation after school, Ethan revealed that he was planning to end the relationship, citing Olivia's controlling behavior and emotional volatility. However, he also admitted that he was afraid, not just of the heartbreak, but of what Olivia might do if he left. He described her as unpredictable and intense. And although he downplayed the danger, his words now read like a tragic foreshadowing of what was to come. This revelation, that Ethan was living in fear, trapped in a toxic relationship, added a heartbreaking layer to the investigation. It reframed the narrative from a sudden domestic tragedy to one that involved prolonged emotional abuse, coercion, and ultimately a fatal consequence for trying to reclaim his freedom. On the morning of June 18th, Ethan was found dead in his apartment. The scene initially appeared to be a suicide, with a note placed on the kitchen counter. However, the note was typed, unusual for Ethan, who was known to handwrite everything. The tone of the letter also felt off to his friends and family, prompting police to look deeper. The morning of June 18th began with a grim discovery. Ethan Reed was found dead inside his modest downtown apartment by his landlord, who had entered the unit after Ethan failed to respond to multiple calls and had not shown up for work. At first glance, the scene inside the apartment suggested a tragic suicide. Ethan's lifeless body was found in the bedroom, and nearby, on the kitchen counter, sat a typed suicide note, cleanly formatted, printed on standard paper, and signed. To some, the contents of the note seemed convincing enough. It spoke of emotional exhaustion, a sense of isolation, and regret for failing the people who mattered. The document was carefully worded, lacking the frantic tone often seen in emotionally distressed notes. Initially, authorities were prepared to rule as suicide, especially given that there were no signs of forced entry, no defensive wounds, and no weapon at the scene. But several details quickly raised red flags. First, the note itself was typed. Those who knew Ethan intimately, friends, co-workers, even the students, unanimously agreed that this was completely out of character. Ethan was a writer at heart. He journaled daily, wrote poetry by hand, and left handwritten notes for students and colleagues regularly. He even insisted on grading essays with a pen rather than digitally. The idea that he would type something as personal and final as a suicide note immediately struck his loved ones as odd. Second, the tone of the letter felt impersonal and detached, more like a generic farewell than a message from someone in deep emotional despair. Ethan's sister, Megan, told investigators that the phrasing didn't sound like him at all. It read like someone trying to sound like Ethan, she said, but they missed his voice. It was almost clinical. Police revisited the scene with renewed scrutiny. They checked the apartment for signs of tampering and searched for any digital files that could match the note. Surprisingly, the note wasn't found on Ethan's computer. No recent documents had been created or printed from his laptop. Additionally, no printer was found in the apartment, suggesting the note was printed elsewhere and brought in. This key discovery undermined the original suicide theory. If Ethan hadn't written or printed the note, who did? Furthermore, a preliminary autopsy revealed that the cause of death was from a high dosage of sedatives combined with asphyxiation, a highly unusual combination in suicides. Toxicology reports would later indicate that the sedatives found in Ethan's bloodstream were not prescribed to him and had been administered in amounts that would have incapacitated him before death. The suspicious note, paired with the unnatural cause of death, transformed the investigation from presumed suicide to a potential homicide staged to look like suicide. Police began to treat the case as a murder, and attention quickly turned to those closest to Ethan, including his controlling and increasingly erratic girlfriend, Olivia Rogan. Detectives interviewed Olivia, who claimed Ethan had been depressed for weeks. She said he'd talked about ending his life and had even written drafts of suicide notes on his laptop. However, forensic analysis revealed no such draft existed. Olivia's story began to unravel. As the circumstances around Ethan Reed's death shifted from a suspected suicide to a possible homicide, detectives turned their attention to his girlfriend, Olivia Rogan, who had been in an on-again, off-again relationship with him for nearly 2 years. When brought in for questioning, Olivia was composed but visibly emotional. She told detectives that Ethan had been struggling with severe depression for the past several months. According to her, he had become increasingly withdrawn, despondent, and disinterested in activities he once loved. Olivia said he'd frequently expressed feelings of hopelessness, especially regarding his career and personal relationships. She also claimed that Ethan had openly discussed suicidal thoughts, even going so far as to draft several suicide notes on his laptop. She explained that he was methodical, not impulsive, and that the typed note found on the kitchen counter was consistent with how he had been planning to exit quietly. Olivia insisted that his death, while devastating, was not surprising to her. At first, her narrative seemed plausible. Those close to Ethan had indeed noticed a change in his mood in the weeks leading up to his death, although none described it as suicidal. But as detectives probed deeper, inconsistencies in Olivia's story started to surface. The most glaring contradiction came from a forensic analysis of Ethan's laptop. When digital forensic experts combed through the device's hard drive, they found no suicide note drafts, no deleted documents, and no word processing activity that aligned with Olivia's timeline. The last access document on Ethan's laptop was an outline for a creative writing workshop, dated 3 days before his death. There were also no signs of recent printing activity. This contradicted Olivia's claim that he had typed and printed several versions of the note. Investigators knew by this point that the suicide note found at the scene had not been printed in Ethan's apartment, and now it appeared it hadn't been typed on his computer either. Confronted with this evidence, Olivia grew evasive. When asked to produce any messages or emails where Ethan may have discussed suicidal thoughts, she claimed he mostly talked in person and rarely opened up over text. But Ethan's phone, which had been recovered from the scene, told a different story. Texts between him and close friends in the days before his death were upbeat, filled with plans to attend a friend's poetry reading and organize a summer road trip. There was no mention of depression or suicidal ideation. Further scrutiny of Olivia's behavior revealed even more troubling details. She was the last person to see Ethan alive, having stayed over at his apartment the night before he died. Security camera footage from a hallway showed her leaving the apartment around 3:17 a.m., several hours before the landlord discovered the body. Olivia had refused to let detectives inspect her laptop without a warrant, raising suspicion. By this point, detectives believed they had enough to doubt Olivia's entire account. The absence of typed drafts, the misleading narrative about Ethan's mental health, and the fabricated claims about the note painted a picture not of a grieving partner, but of someone actively constructing a false story. Her initial composure during questioning was now seen as calculated. With each new piece of evidence, Olivia's credibility eroded further, and detectives began preparing for a more aggressive phase of the investigation, one that would soon expose even darker truths about her obsession and unravel her role in Ethan's suspicious death. They subpoenaed Olivia's phone records and found months of messages between her and Ethan's childhood best friend, Marcus. The text started off friendly but grew flirtatious, then explicitly romantic and sexual. Olivia and Marcus had been having a secret affair behind Ethan's back. As suspicions around Olivia Rogan's involvement in Ethan Reed's death mounted, detectives sought to uncover her private communications to look for motive, accomplices, or evidence of premeditation. One of the most revealing breakthroughs came when investigators subpoenaed Olivia's phone records, including call logs, SMS texts, encrypted chat apps, and cloud backups. Among thousands of lines of data, one relationship stood out: her correspondence with Marcus Langston, Ethan's childhood best friend. Marcus had known Ethan since elementary school. They had been practically inseparable throughout their teens, and even as adults, they remained close. Marcus was a frequent visitor at Ethan's apartment and had been present during key moments in Ethan and Olivia's relationship. Because of his deep-rooted trust, Olivia's secret communications with Marcus felt like a betrayal on multiple fronts. Not just a romantic relationship, but a lifelong friendship. When detectives examined the message history, the timeline told a story of deceit that stretched back nearly 9 months. Initial conversations, 8 to 6 months before Ethan's death. The messages between Olivia and Marcus began innocuously. They chatted about Ethan, shared jokes, and discussed shared interests. At this stage, the tone was platonic, although some messages suggested a growing emotional intimacy, with Marcus confiding in Olivia about his own struggles and Olivia venting about Ethan's mood swings and emotional distance. Shift in tone, 6 to 4 months prior. Around this period, the language in their texts began shifting. Subtle flirtations crept into the conversations, compliments about each other's appearances, late-night texts, and messages that bordered on emotional cheating. They increasingly spoke in private terms, expressing thoughts and frustrations they hadn't even shared with Ethan. Affair begins 4 months to 1 month before Ethan's death. At this point, the messages became explicitly romantic and sexual. Investigators uncovered intimate texts, exchanged photos, and plans for secret meetups. Some texts referenced specific dates when Ethan would be out of town or asleep, suggesting calculated timing. Olivia wrote things like, "I feel like you understand me more than he ever could." And Marcus responded with, "I can't keep pretending around him. I want you." They discussed fantasies of being together, without Ethan in the picture. Some texts became disturbingly suggestive, with Marcus writing, "Sometimes I wish he'd just disappear." Although these messages stopped short detailing an actual murder plot, they clearly showed a motive and emotional groundwork for betrayal. Days before Ethan's death. In the final week leading to Ethan's death, the messages between Olivia and Marcus grew more frantic and intense. Olivia expressed guilt and fear, worrying that someone might find out. Marcus told her to stay calm and assured her that it'll all work itself out soon. Notably, there was a sudden gap in messages starting about 36 hours before Ethan's death, with only one brief exchange after the body was discovered. "Olivia, we need to talk." "Call me." Marcus, "Delete everything. I mean everything." This final message sent chills through the investigative team. The deliberate instruction to erase evidence suggested a consciousness of guilt. If not direct involvement, then at least knowledge of serious crime. The discovery of the affair dramatically shifted the direction of the case. Investigators now had a clear motive: jealousy, obsession, and a desire to remove Ethan from the equation. Olivia's credibility had already been compromised by her lies about Ethan's mental health and the fake suicide notes. Now, with this affair exposed, she moved from a person of interest to a prime suspect. Marcus Langston, too, was no longer just a grieving friend. He was potentially an accomplice or even a co-conspirator. Detectives moved swiftly to interrogate Marcus and began unraveling the layers of deception that had been carefully hidden. Until now, detectives interviewed Marcus, who was nervous and evasive. At first, he denied any romantic relationship with Olivia, but when presented with the text messages, he broke down and confessed to the affair. He claimed Ethan was becoming increasingly paranoid and controlling. On the night of Ethan's death, Marcus said Olivia called him in a panic, claiming Ethan had attacked her and she had fought back in self-defense. Following the explosive discovery of Olivia Rogan's secret affair with Marcus Langston, Ethan Reed's lifelong best friend, detectives brought Marcus in for questioning. At this point, he was no longer seen as a grieving friend, but a central figure in the unraveling mystery, and possibly an accomplice in Ethan's death. The interrogation begins. Marcus arrived at the station visibly shaken. He was sweating, avoiding eye contact, and fidgeting with his hands, all signs of nervousness and emotional strain. Detectives started with general questions about his relationship with Ethan, and when he had last seen or spoken to him. Marcus initially portrayed himself as a concerned friend, claiming he was shocked by Ethan's death and confused about what had happened. When asked about his relationship with Olivia, he firmly denied any romantic involvement, stating, "She was just Ethan's girlfriend. We talked sometimes, but nothing more." This claim contradicted the months of explicit and emotional text messages investigators had already reviewed. The turning point: confrontation with evidence. Detectives then presented Marcus with hard evidence. Printed transcripts of the text conversations, including sexual content and messages where he and Olivia fantasized about being together without Ethan. Upon seeing the text laid out before him, Marcus's demeanor shifted dramatically. He slumped in his chair, dropped his head into his hands, and went quiet for several seconds. Then he muttered, Okay, we were seeing each other. But it wasn't like that." He confessed to the affair, but quickly tried to reframe the relationship. According to him, the affair just happened and wasn't planned. Olivia was the one who first initiated flirtation. Ethan had grown increasingly suspicious, emotionally unstable, and paranoid in the months before his death. Marcus claimed he felt torn between loyalty to Ethan and his feelings for Olivia. This narrative was seen as an attempt to minimize his culpability and shift the emotional weight onto Olivia. What happened the night Ethan died? Detectives then zeroed in on the critical timeline, the night Ethan was killed. According to Marcus, he had not been with Olivia or Ethan that night, However, he received a frantic phone call from Olivia around 11:30 p.m. Olivia was crying, panicked, and claimed that Ethan had snapped during an argument. She told Marcus that Ethan accused her of cheating, which was true, and allegedly physically attacked her in a violent rage. Olivia said she fought back to protect herself, and that Ethan had hit his head and wasn't moving. Marcus said he tried to calm her down, told her to call 911, but Olivia refused. Instead, she allegedly said, "No one's going to believe me. They'll say I planned this." Marcus claimed this was the last he heard from Olivia that night. Detectives were skeptical of this version of events. While Marcus insisted he was not present at the scene, his actions afterward raised questions. He never called 911 or alerted anyone else about what Olivia had told him. Instead, he deleted texts, shut off his phone for a period, and waited until news of Ethan's death became public before making any statements. His failure to report the incident, and the message urging Olivia to delete everything, made detectives question whether he was more involved than he let on, or if he at least helped Olivia cover up a crime. Additionally, his version of Ethan being paranoid and controlling aligned with the false narrative Olivia had already tried to plant earlier in the investigation, suggesting their stories had been coordinated. What this meant for the investigation, Marcus's confession to the affair, and the call from Olivia on the night of the murder, provided crucial context and timeline validation for the detectives. However, it also opened new avenues. Was Olivia telling the truth about self-defense? Did Marcus help plan or clean up the scene? Was this a premeditated murder disguised as a domestic dispute? Detectives now had to pursue digital footprints, called metadata, GPS logs, and any surveillance footage that might place Marcus closer to the crime than he admitted. His evasiveness, deception, and delayed confession only deepened the cloud of suspicion surrounding him and Olivia. The case was evolving from a tragic loss into a conspiracy between lovers, where murder may have been the final act of a toxic, hidden obsession. Investigators conducted a forensic sweep of Ethan's home and discovered signs of a struggle, including broken glass, overturned furniture, and blood spatter in the living room. However, the scene appeared staged, with certain items too neatly placed. Additionally, Ethan's body had injuries inconsistent with a simple fall or self-defense, such as blunt force trauma to the back of the head. This evidence suggested that the death may have been premeditated murder, not an act of self-defense as Olivia claimed. Olivia's internet search history revealed incriminating queries, such as how to make a murder look like self-defense and how to erase fingerprints. These searches, made just days before Ethan's death, strongly indicated premeditation and directly contradicted her claim of acting spontaneously in self-defense. This digital evidence became a critical turning point in the case against her. Ethan's discovery of hidden cameras in his apartment was a pivotal moment in the case. After noticing unusual behavior from Olivia and feeling increasingly paranoid, Ethan uncovered 6 covert cameras, hidden in everyday objects like a potted plant, smoke detector, and picture frame. This realization confirmed his suspicions that Olivia had been surveilling him, violating his privacy in the most intimate ways. He shared this discovery with his sister, Amanda, and decided to confront Olivia, leading to the eventual breakup. After Ethan confronted Olivia about the hidden cameras, the situation escalated. Despite Olivia's emotional pleas and justifications for her actions, Ethan firmly ended the relationship. Olivia's demeanor quickly changed from desperation to anger, and when Ethan insisted she leave, she became threatening. Later that evening, Olivia returned to Ethan's apartment, where a violent confrontation ensued. During an argument, she attacked Ethan with a kitchen knife, leading to a struggle. Despite Ethan's attempt to defend himself, Olivia fatally stabbed him. When police arrived, Olivia was found sitting next to Ethan's lifeless body, still holding the knife. She showed no resistance during her arrest, repeating that Ethan was supposed to love her forever